Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crypto Watch. Right. So if you are here, with me live, right? Please, click on that like button, right? So that I know that you are here live with me, right? Yep. So today we have another episode, right, for Crypto Watch, right? And today we're actually going to talk about this particular coin, right? We're going to analyze whether there's a potential upside for this coin, especially after some significant developments in its court case, right? So which coin do you think I'm referring to, right? So if you have been following the news, this has been quite prominent. Like this coin has been in the limelight for quite some time, right? And the outcome of the court case is going to have ripples right throughout the whole cryptocurrency world, right? So this is something that you might want to consider, right? Because it can affect the all other cryptocurrencies as well, right? So if we are ready, right, to find out my insights, we shall proceed, right? But before I do, if you're live here with me once again, please click on that like button, right? So that I know that you're here live with me. Right. So before I go into the topic proper, right? So for those of you who are joining me for the first time, let me do a quick introduction of myself, right? So I'm the trade engineer, TTE for short. Right, so I have about 6 to 7 years of trading experience. Right, so I've traded numerous instruments, including stocks, forex, futures, and cryptocurrency. Right, and I also help numerous aspiring traders unlock their best trade within them, and unleash that trading potential that they have. And all this can be done using some simple to use yet effective techniques. Right. So before I, go into the topic proper, right? So some disclaimers over here. Please bear with me, right? So while the accuracy of information here is ensured as far as possible, there will be no responsibility taken for any loss of inconvenience created by any omission or error. The ideas, suggestions, examples, and other information presented here are just for reference and educational purposes only. Thirdly, presentation contents here are not intended in any way to give trading advice or recommendations to buy or sell any cryptocurrency in this case. And me, the trade engineer, shall not have any liability for any loss or expense whatsoever relating to the trading decisions taken by the audience. And last but not least, all copyrights reserved. Right, so let's go into the topic proper, right, for today. So this is the court case development. So I actually extracted this particular piece of news article, right, from this website here, jdsupra, right, .com. Right, it's actually a recent article, right, on 17 March. Right, so the heading of the article, right, is a district court, right, allows fair notice defense in SEC cryptocurrency case against, I actually blank out this cryptocurrency coin, lapsed by denies motions to dismiss. Right, so what coin do you think I'm referring to? Right, if you know which coin I'm referring to, leave it in the comments below, right, so that I know that you know what I'm referring to. Right, but if not, right, let me review this particular coin. Right, so this coin is none other than Ripple. Right, so it actually has the ticker symbol of XRP. Right, so basically this has been rippling through the whole news, right, in the whole cryptocurrency news lately, right? So let's delve into further detail, right, of what this news is actually all about. Right, so there's actually this court case, right, Ripple, right, this cryptocurrency coin against the commission, right, the SEC commission. So what is this court case actually all about? Right, so from the same article, right, basically, the SEC, right, basically SEC stands for the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? They actually, filed basically an action, right, against this cryptocurrency coin, right? So it actually alleged that, right, they actually, basically raised some amount of money, 1.3 billion, right, in this case, to an unregistered ongoing security, right? So it actually, they're basically suing them, right, for basically not registering their security, right, or not registering their coin. Yeah, in this case, it's the Ripple digital currency, right? So this, is actually, this is actually setting a precedent, right? Because if let's say SEC actually won, right? If actually wins, it actually wins against Ripple, right? It could have some repercussions with the other digital currencies, right? Be it even Bitcoin, right, might be affected. So this is something that we all have to watch out for, right? But what is the latest ruling, right? Because lately the court has actually ruled, and that has actually that is a development I'm actually referring to in this presentation. Right. So very recently on the 11th of March, right, the judge actually gave two substantive ruling, right. So these two are quite critical, right. The first one is basically denying, right, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission's motion to actually strike the defendants. The defendants here refers to the Ripple, right, fair notice defense. Right. So that actually means, right, what that means is that it's actually good for Ripple, right? Because it actually SEC is actually trying to say, oh, Ripple is their fair notice defense is not valid. Yeah, but the judge actually ruled that it is actually valid, right? So they do have a case for them for their own defense, right? For Ripple's defense, right? So this is actually a loss to SEC. Right, and the second ruling, right, that they made was basically denying the individual defendants' motions to dismiss. Yep. So this actually, can be seen as not so good for Ripple because they still have to continue this court case with SEC, right? Because the defendants here refers to Ripple, right? So they basically the court is ruling that Ripple, although they tried to dismiss this claim, but the court said there's actually some valid basis behind this. Right. So let's go into further detail, right? So what is this fair notice defense, right? That is mentioned in the article. Yep. So there's a lot of words here, but I just like to point out to you, some of the key points here, right? So this basically highlighted in yellow, right? So basically, right, it is this fair notice defense is actually basically basically there is a fair notice that its conduct was a violation of the law, right? So basically, here they say SEC failed to provide clarity on whether to label XRP a security, right? XRP is that Ripple coin, right? So so this is actually what Ripple tries to defend for themselves, right? And the Ripple also argued that SEC has unfairly engaged in regulation, right? And targeted Ripple for unregistered sales of XRP, right? So this is that fair notice defense that the court documents is referring to, right? So, but what we do have to take note from this article, right? From this point is that the court has actually said that there is validity behind this defense. So it basically puts Ripple in a good light. Right, but what about the second point, right, about the motions dismiss? Right, so if we look into further detail, right, there are some details of the motions, right? So there is this aiding and abetting claims, right? So the court has denied the individual defendants, there's Ripple, right, motions to dismiss the claims that they aided and abetted the Ripple's violation, right, of this section whatever 5 of Security Act, right? So yeah, basically that this is something not so good for Ripple, right? So remains to be seen, right? The court will still continue to go on, right? And we shall see what will happen from this development. Right, and you also mentioned here, right, that the court also determined that the SEC met its pleading burden as to both defendants, and the SEC decision to charge individuals with aiding and abetting an unregistered offering was notable, right? Yeah, this is a notable portion, right, because it's unprecedented, right? It actually does not usually press charges against individuals, right? So this is something that is quite a new development. It's setting a precedent for the market. Right, and there are other motions. This is the second motion that was dismissed, right? So the Ripple actually tried to argue, right, that there's this basically the domestic versus foreign offers, right? They argued that the alleged offers and the sales of XRP were not domestic, right? So they're predominantly foreign, right? So on that case, on that basis, they suggested to the court that they should, this claim should actually be dismissed, right? But the court threw it out of the window and said that nope, they still have to look into that, right? So here are some of the conclusions, right, from this basically this court case, right? So first of all, it basically presents some critical issues, right, regarding the application of laws to cryptocurrency, right? Whether there's going to be more regulation for cryptocurrency, right? This is going to set a precedent, right? And we mentioned that there's that viability, right, of the fair notice defenses, right, that was thrown out by the window by the court, right? So basically, it basically gives a win to Ripple in this case. But for the other two, right, the aiding and abetting liability as well as the application of Morrison, right, these two also dismissed by the court, right? So this is not so good for Ripple, but nevertheless, the first part here is a big win for Ripple. Right. So, before I continue further, right, do give this video a like or a love, right, if you're enjoying my sharing so far. Right. And let's continue, right, on this court case development, right, between Ripple and the SEC. Right. So, some other articles, right, so this is basically taken from another article, right, on 18th of March, also a very recent article, right, where they actually interviewed, right, the Ripple CEO, right, and he actually claimed, right, that this is actually a big win, right, not just for him, but a big win for the whole cryptocurrency industry, right. And let's take a look at some at his a recent video, right, that was broadcasted.
Shanali, talk to us about how the markets reacted to this news. Obviously, a volatile market and a volatile market for Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, even though we see Ripple down a little bit today, it did really rise after this news. And over the 7-day period, actually, Emily, if you take a look, you do see Ripple rising to the point that it's rising almost twice as much as you see in Bitcoin over that period, and almost 3 times as you're seeing in Ethereum. So yes, very good news in terms of Ripple and its SEC defense, but there are a lot of questions remaining for the market, not just for Ripple, but the crypto industry here at large. And that question is, as Bloomberg Intelligence calls it, a factual one. Will it cause more issuers to register with the SEC? And what type of regulatory overhang does it leave for the market, even after the Biden executive order that created some clarity for the market?
All right, Shanali, stick with us. We're going to get deeper into this conversation with Ripple CEO himself, Brad Garlinghouse. Brad, good to have you back here on the show. You called this a victory in your battle against the SEC. What does it mean for you and also the broader crypto industry?
Yeah, I do think I'll start there, really. I think it is a victory not just for Ripple, the company, but also the whole crypto industry, because the SEC, I think, has consistently tried to expand their reach and their control over the crypto industry. We've seen that not just with Ripple, but in other cases. And to have the executive order, as Shanali was talking about, the executive order came out and really said to all agencies, hey, we need to be coordinated. If we want the United States to be competitive in this key technology platform, we need to not have one group behaving one way and another group behaving another way. So we were really pleased by not just the court's decision, but also the executive order that came out last week.
What do you make of the very prominent role that crypto is playing in the war on Ukraine, and also concerns about how cryptocurrency could be used, for example, as a tool to circumvent sanctions by Russians?
The world would say, hey, we're going to acknowledge and
they've been at the crosshairs of a number of different firms. Do you think the SEC is taking a tougher stance than the administration at large, and do you think that will hinder at all some of the progress that some firms are making?
Look, I think there's no question that the United States Securities and Exchange Commission has reduced the competitiveness of this critical industry in the United States. I think they've been out of step, not just with other parts of the U.S. government, but they've been out of step with other major economies around the world. The only country in the world that considers XRP, the digital asset that Ripple uses in our technology stack, the only country in the world that thinks XRP could be a security is the United States. we look successfully in the UK, in Switzerland, in Japan, in the UAE, in Singapore. All of these countries have acknowledged XRP as a currency because that's how it's used. So I think the way that the U.S., if we want the U.S. to be a leader in this new, growing, critical, innovative industry, like the internet 20 years ago, we need that regulatory clarity. And the SEC is really just coming out and saying, we're going to file lawsuits, enforcement. We're not going to provide clear rules so that people know how to operate as other countries have done.
All right. Yep. And that is basically the media interview, right, with the CEO of Ripple, right? So, let's see, right, some other articles, right, of what others make of this, development in the court case. Right. So, this is another article, right, from the InsideBitcoins.com, right? So basically, right, what it said here, right, is that, despite some, basically saying the price action of this XRP, right, Ripple coin, it actually sees a very good position, right, for the future. It actually sees potential for this coin, right? So it actually mentioned that, this development in this court case, right, suggested that, this might actually play out well for Ripple, right? They might actually secure a very good settlement as a result, right? Mainly because, the judge actually, refused to actually strike the Ripple's fair notice defense, right? So that is actually, what they make of it was that this is actually a big win for Ripple. Right, and they also mentioned that it is likely that eventually Ripple might win this entire case, or at least secure a favorable outcome for itself. Right, so that is what analysts are actually thinking of, right, and they are actually projecting that this Ripple coin might actually surge very soon. Yeah, in fact, there are some people who tweeted on this as well, and there's this guy here, Jeremy Hogan, right? So basically, he also mentioned that this is a win for Ripple, right? Basically because of that part of striking the fair notice defense, right, was denied, right? So this is a loss for SEC and a win for Ripple, right? But with all these news, as a backdrop, right? The important thing here is like what is Ripple moving forward? What is the outlook for Ripple moving forward? And over here, right, I am going to share some of my insights, right, of this Ripple coin. Yeah, but before I go into the details, right, if you are finding value in this video so far, right, do click the like or the love button, right, so that I'll continue sharing this, every week with all of you. Right, so let's go into the technical portion, proper, right? So yeah, this is basically the chart, right? This is the price chart for XRP or Ripple, right, on the daily basis, right? So I have a few lines here, right? The downtrend line as well as the uptrend line, as well as my RSI indicator as well as my MACD indicator, right? So let's first siphon out some of the bullish signs, right? So first of all, right, if you take a look at this downtrend line, this immediate downtrend line, right, it has recently just crossed above this immediate downtrend line. And the good thing, right, is that the recent prices seems to be trading above this downtrend line. So it seems like there is some support, right, going on here. And if this remains supported, there could be some upside, right? It might actually bounce up. Right. Secondly, right, it has been also supported by this uptrend line, right? It has been tested numerous times before in the past, right? And it hasn't broken below this uptrend line yet, right? So if the price can continue this trend of forming higher lows, right, there could be possibility of further upside for XRP. Right, and the third point that we should take note of is this MACD, right? This MACD has also recently seen a crossover into the positive territory, right? You can see now it's still maintaining positive, right? So if it does remain positive, moving forward, right, there could be even more upside for this coin. Right, and if we also add in other indicators as well, right? So we have over here the simple moving average, right? So we have two colors, right? We have the black and the purple, right? So the black is actually the 20 days simple moving average, right? And the purple is actually the 50 days simple moving average, right? So if you actually study simple moving average, right, you always want the lower day moving average to be higher than the greater day moving average, right? So in this case here, right, we have the 20-day moving average being higher than the 50-day moving average. So that's an indication, right, that there is some uptrend, right? It might be actually moving onto the upside, right? Although there is this concern, right, that the gap is actually narrowing, right? But it's still positive, right? It is still, the 20 simple moving average is still more than the 50 simple moving average, right? So if these trends continue, right, there could be further upside for this coin, right? But we do have to take note that there are some resistance level as well, right? So over here, I've drawn out some of the resistance levels, right? Both on the horizontal resistance level as well as the downtrend line, right? So this downtrend line is a bit different, right, from the previous downtrend line, right? So the previous downtrend line was connecting some of the bodies, right, of the candles. But for this downtrend line, it's a bit more conservative, right? It's actually connecting the wicks, right, of the candles, right? The top wicks of the candles, right? So if you connect the top wicks of the candles, right, you can see that it actually hasn't really crossed this downtrend line yet, right? So the question here will be actually, will it actually break past this line, or will this line be the resistance that it cannot cross, right? So that is something we have to watch out for. We have to be mindful of, and to see whether the price eventually breaks past this barrier. And we have the horizontal resistance, right? So this is the line that is drawn here, right, about 0.85 US dollars, right? Right, so or rather 85 cents, right, US cents, right? So basically, right, you can see that this resistance has been tested several times before, right? Even recently here, right? But it is still trading below this horizontal resistance level, right? So the question here still remains whether it can eventually break past this horizontal resistance, right? Currently, it's still trading below, unless it breaks past it convincingly. We won't be sure, right? It might actually just hit this and bounce back down again, right? So that is another thing you have to watch out for, right? And since we talk about resistance, we also have to talk about support levels, right? So this is the same uptrend line that we saw earlier, except this is more zoom in, right? So it is supported by its uptrend line, right? You can see it's numerous times, right? It's tested numerous times before, right? So if it continues this trend of making higher lows in prices, right, there is a good chance that we'll see a rebound. And we have this horizontal support, right? They're tested once here and a few times here, right? At about 0.69 to 0.7. Right, and the question here remains, whether this would be a strong support for this XRP coin. Right, at the moment, it seems like it is, some way off the support, right? So that's a good sign, right? But if it actually breaks below either of these support levels, then we do have to watch out to see whether what will happen after that. Right. So, with all these taken into totality, right, I have drawn out, a suggested trading plan. But do take note, right, this is just my own suggestion, right? It might not work for everyone, right? So please do your own due diligence, before entering any trade. Right. So my suggested trading plan here, right, is basically if you're an aggressive trader, right, you're taking high risk, right, you can actually enter a long position now, right, and you set a cut loss slightly below that immediate downtrend line that I shown at the very first slide, right, earlier, right. But if you are more conservative, right, if you are less of a risk taker, right, and you don't mind holding it for a longer period of time, right, then you should wait for more confirmation, right, and to do so, right, basically you have to wait for other signals like the more conservative downtrend line that I showed earlier, connecting the wicks, right, of the candles, as well as that horizontal resistance level, right? You have to wait for this confirmation, right? If the price actually cross above these two resistance levels, right, then that is the confirmation that you will get, right, to actually enter this position more confidently, right? And you can also set a cut loss slightly below that more conservative downtrend line or the horizontal resistance, right? So that is my suggested plan for longing the stock, right? There's another way that you can do it, which is basically you can enter a long position now, and when it crosses this conservative downtrend line or horizontal resistance level, you can add your positions, right? That is another way, right? So it depends on your strategy, right? But on the flip side of things, right? Because this is basically on the side that if it's bullish, if it's going to go up, right? But there could be the flip side, right, where it actually comes down, right? So what we'll be watching out for will be those support levels that are drawn out here, right? So if that uptrend line, right, this uptrend line actually breaks convincingly, right, we should actually wait, right, and wait for the next support to be found before entering a long position, right? So this is something for you to take note if you are actually considering trading Ripple in the near future. Right, and that concludes my sharing for Ripple, right, the Ripple coin. And once again, right, if you are enjoying my sharing so far, right, do give this video a like or a love, right, so that I'll continue sharing with this material with all you week in and week out. Right, and now let's change section to our Bitcoin review, right? So we do this every week, right? And so this week is no exception. So let's recap, right, on Bitcoin once again, right? And if you haven't checked out already, right, I do this Bitcoin analysis every week, right? You can check out my previous analysis in my past videos, right? So let's quickly go through, right, some of the points that I mentioned, right, previously, right? So this was what I mentioned last week, right? Just a quick recap, right? I'll quickly go through in case you have forgotten, right? So there are a lot of things here, but just let me quickly just go through some of the key points, right? So we had that downtrend line, right? That basically, last week it was still trading below this downtrend line, right? It hasn't broken above this downtrend line, right? So that was a question that we asked then, right? And that where this uptrend line, right? There was the support, right? It was actually pretty close to this uptrend line, right? And we had a question of whether prices would actually remain supported by this uptrend line, right? And then the rest is like the upper resistance line, right? The horizontal resistance line, right? So it was tested previously in the past, right? The price was still trading below this upper resistance line. And for the immediate resistance line, right, it was actually testing it previously, right, over here, this region over here, right. So it actually broke previously, right, on this day, right, but it fell back and now it was testing that immediate resistance line once again, right. And we also mentioned about the MACD, right. MACD went into the negative region again, right, but it's pretty close, right. It can still make a crossover, right. So that was a question we asked as well. And last but not least, the 6th point that we mentioned was on the various support levels, right? In case any of the support breaks, right? In this case, was the uptrend line, right? If the uptrend line breaks, these are the different levels of support we could be watching out for. Right, and let's fast forward to basically this week, right? So with the 7 days of trading, right? What has materialized ever since? Right, so this is actually the same downtrend line, right, that was drawn last week, right? And you can see, right, that in recent days, right, we have actually seen the price breaking above this line, right? And currently, it seems like the price is actually staying above this line, right? So this is something good, good on the bullish side of things, right? If this actually remains supported, right, because it actually caused resistance and now this might become the support, right? So if the price remains supported, there could be further upside to Bitcoin. Right, and the uptrend line, right, we have to slightly revise it, right, to be a bit, more gentle sloping, right. So actually now it is, supported by this uptrend line, right. It's tested numerous times before, right. So that's a new support to watch out for. Right, and the upper resistance line, right, that's the same upper resistance line that was drawn earlier, right. So as of the moment, it hasn't crossed it yet, right. It is still trading below this upper resistance line. Right, and the immediate resistance line, right? So there's this immediate resistance line, right? That was crossed, right? So it crossed again, right? Once again, it's broken above this immediate resistance line and is now staying above this immediate resistance line. And for the MACD, right? So we had the question whether it will cross over to the positive region, right? And it actually did, right? So you can see, right? Now it is in the positive region, right? So that's a good sign. It might indicate, further upside for Bitcoin. Right. So with that, right, out of the way, right? So what is the future for Bitcoin, right? So actually, the points are pretty similar to what I covered in the previous slide, right? So the same thing is basically the same things to watch out for, right? So basically, this downtrend line, right now that it has crossed it, whether this downtrend line will now remain as a strong support, right? So that is something we need to watch out for. If it remains, strongly supported, then we might be able to take a trade, right? If you are trading Bitcoin. And set a cut loss slightly below this downtrend line. Right, and we had that uptrend line, right? So this is the support now, right? This is the new support, right? So we need to see the price continue making these higher lows, right, in the future. Right, and we have the upper resistance line, right? So if the price actually breaks out above this upper resistance line, right, that's another confirmation, right, that this the Bitcoin might be heading for new highs, right? And like there might be a breakout in the near future, right? So that is something we also have to watch out for, right? We might actually want to add positions if it actually breaks above this upper resistance line. Right, so the immediate resistance line, right? So it actually broke out above this immediate resistance line, right? As I mentioned previously, right? So this is now has become the support, right? So we have to see whether this remains the strong support, right? Whether it will break down again, like what it did last time, right? If it doesn't, there might be indication that this is support. This will become a strong support, and the price might make new highs. And the MACD, right? So it actually just turned positive, right? So if it still remains positive, right, that it will be a very bullish sign for Bitcoin as well. Yep, so these are some of the things we want to watch out for, right? So over here, once again, I have a suggested trading plan for Bitcoin, right? So once again, I urge all of you to actually do your own due diligence, right? This is just my own opinion, right? It might not work for everyone. Right. So my own suggestion is you can there are many indicators that are showing that Bitcoin is might be turning bullish, right? But we can enter a long position, right? If there is a convincing breakout, right? So at the moment here, right, we see they cross the downtrend line, but it's not very convincing, right? It's not very very bullish green candle over here, right? And it was also the weekend, right? So so this is not very convincing in my opinion, right? So we do have to watch out to see what happens on Monday, right? And whether this can become the strong support, right, for Bitcoin prices, right? So you can enter, right, a long position if you are aggressive, right? But if you want more confirmation, right, we can actually wait a bit longer, right? Wait till this upper resistance line is cleared, right, convincingly. That is another alternative you can employ, right? Alternatively, you can actually enter now and you add positions later, right? That will also work as well. Right, but on the flip side of things, right, if we actually, there could be a possibility of Bitcoin turning for the worst, right? So we do have to watch out for all the support levels, right? So in particular, this uptrend line, right? If it actually broken convincingly, right, we have to wait again, right, till you see the next support, right? So these are some of the things you might want to take note of, right? If you are actually intending to trade Bitcoin in the near future. Right, so that concludes my sharing, my weekly review for Bitcoin. And if you are loving what I'm sharing so far, right, do give this video a like or a love, right? Okay. And let me end off with some reminders, right? So I have a Facebook group, right? So if you haven't joined already, this is the handle to join my Facebook group. So basically my Facebook group, right, I would not just be sharing on cryptocurrency, right? I'll be sharing, a lot of other things for trading, right? Basically anything involving trading will be shared in my Facebook group, right? So it could be stocks, it could be futures, it could be forex, so on and so forth, right? So you can join me on my Facebook group, for more of my insights and more of my other resources. Yeah. So over there, I also have some, if I have some ebook or some calculator, right? I'll also share with all you guys, in that Facebook group. Right. So you can join me there if you don't mind. Right. And I also have social media pages, right? So if you are seeing this video for the very first time and you haven't followed me already, right, you can always follow me on my various social media pages, right? So I have my Facebook page, right, my Instagram, as well as my Twitter, right? So you can follow me on any of these pages if you have, right? So over there, I also will talk about trading, right? Not just about cryptocurrency, but also about all the other trading, all the other instruments, right? And last but not least, right, before I end off today's session, right, just like urge all of you to click the like or love button, right, if you actually enjoy my sharing today, right, and also do leave a comment, below, and share this video, right, with people that you think might benefit from my sharing today, right. So with that, let me first see if we have any comments. Yep, I think we do not have any comments, but if you do have any questions regarding what I've shared today, right, do let me know. Do leave it in the comments and I will respond to you as soon as I see it. Right, and with that, right, I will end off today's session, right. I hope you had a insightful session today, and see you all next Sunday at the same time at 9:30 p.m. See you guys.